Hop in the Supermobile and join us for the spin-off podcast Beyond Metropolis, available exclusively for members of my Patreon community. It's a monthly tour across the DC universe with the signature Digging for Kryptonite style applied to your other DC favorites. Additional Patreon rewards include advanced listens, sponsorships, and more. We offer regular monthly memberships, discounted annual plans, free trials, and a la carte purchases. Visit patreon.com/Anthony Desiato or click the link in the show notes for more. Thank you all. I'm a proud backer of the Paragons of Earth crowdfunder. The creative team of Percival Constantine, Thomas DJ, and Eric Johns have plucked forgotten Golden Age superheroes from the public domain, reinvented them as their own sort of Justice League, and put them up against a Lovecraftian apocalypse. Support this project by going to crowdfunder.com, that's crowdfunder without an E, /paragonscomic, and read a free sample. Also, Perry, who's been a guest on the show, hosts the Superhero Cinephiles podcast about superheroes in media. Be sure to listen wherever you get podcasts. 30 years ago, I stood in front of a comic shop advertising the death of Superman in its window display. That moment outside Heroes World set me on a path, a lifelong fan journey leading directly from that tattered red cape to this podcast. Now, together, we mine Superman's vast 85-year mythology by examining, discovering, and reconsidering the stories that have shaped the last son of Krypton. Welcome to Digging for Kryptonite, a Superman fan journey. I'm your host, Anthony Desiato. This week, we're joined by a very special guest. It's the editor-in-chief of SupermanHomepage.com, a.k.a. the #1 Superman fan site in the world, Steve Younis. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure, and I want to thank you a couple of times over here. First, I want to thank you for reaching out. You connected after our recent My Adventures with Superman episode, and you offered to podcast together, and I'm just so glad that we were able to connect and make this happen. So thank you, first of all, for reaching out.
No, my pleasure. It's a community of fans out there, and we tend to, I don't know, there seems to be like this idea that we're all competitors, when really we're all here to celebrate the Man of Steel and to, be fans together and enjoy the character together. So I've been reaching out to a couple of different podcasts and a couple of different fan sites to say, hey, let's collaborate on things and boost both our audiences.
That's fantastic. I've said this, I think, every time I've had a fellow Superman podcaster on the show, so I don't want to sound like a broken record, but it is so true. And I've experienced the same thing where there are instances where you might expect people to be competitors, right? We're in the same space, we're doing similar sorts of things, but really, I think the shared love of our favorite character kind of transcends everything. And I like to think that some of the ideals of the character we love, right, are things that we identify with personally, right? And so the idea of cooperation and friendliness, those are things that we are hopefully living since they're parts of the character we love.
100%. I mean, that's why we are Superman fans, is because we are inspired by him. We hope to emulate him in many ways and, wish that we were more like him. And so the Superman fandom gets a bad rap because we have, over the years, really been fractured when it comes to who is our favorite Superman, whether we like a certain movie, whether we think the costume should look this, that way, or the other way. And so there is that element of fans going at each other and having that difference of opinion and seeing that as a negative, when really with 85 years of a character's history, there's bound to be different things that we like and don't like. But that doesn't mean that should set us apart. That should be, fruitful ground for great conversation.
I could not agree more. And I want to circle back to that, but I want to make my second round of thanks to you. And I'm not just saying this to blow smoke, but I want to say on the record, on behalf of myself and all the Superman fans out there, thank you for what you have cultivated through Superman Homepage, because I can't imagine there's any Superman fan out there who either hasn't gone to your site at some point or watched one of the YouTube lives or seen a social media post or had some connection with the world of Superman Homepage. So you've been this ambassador for and curator of Superman. And so again, on behalf of all of us, really, thank you very much, because I've been going to your site for as long as I can remember. So I just wanted to say that.
Oh, thank you very much. That means a lot. Yeah, sometimes sitting on the other side of this computer screen can get a bit lonely, and you're not sure whether or not you're actually reaching people, or if you're having an impact, or if anyone appreciates what you're doing. And it's always nice to get that pat on the back. Not that we seek it, but it's nice to know. I mean, we do it because we love it, and I wouldn't do it for this long. Have since 1996, I've been running the website. So it's nice to get that recognition every now and again.
No, absolutely. So speaking of how long you've been doing this, I did a little bit of research. I read the about section on your website. So thank you for making it so easy. So I got to read a bit about how you got here. And I know you've written about it, and I know you've spoken about it, but to the extent that you'd be willing to recount it for us, I'd appreciate it. I know it was initially through animation that you met Superman.
Yeah, so in my early days, I don't want to give away how old I am too much, but Saturday morning cartoons were a thing back in the day. You couldn't just watch them whenever you wanted to. They weren't always readily available like they are now at the tip of your finger. But so Saturday morning cartoons, watching the Super Friends, watching the New Adventures of Superman reruns. I'm not that old. And just then the Christopher Reeve films in the late 70s, early 80s were right in my wheelhouse of, that impressionable time of becoming a young person, becoming a teenager. So very much that was my introduction to Superman, and why I gravitated towards the character at an early age. But then as you grow older, you get, you go into your teenage years and into young adult years, and you grow away from the things that you enjoyed as a young child, and mature, so to speak, and start getting interest in girls and in jobs and, what have you. And so you kind of move away from your childhood, attractions.
No, I certainly understand. Between this show and another show that I've done for many years called My Comic Shop History, where I've spoken to fans and retailers all over the place, I think that's a very common experience where there are ebbs and flows to our fandoms. And even for myself, I've talked about it on the show. I've always loved Superman, but I definitely had a stretch probably around the time of the New 52 forward where I just wasn't as plugged in. And one of the joys of doing the show has been filling in those gaps in my fandom. One of the gaps in my fandom was Super Friends. I had seen a few episodes here and there as a kid, but really for me, Superman the Animated Series, that's what I was watching in the 90s as I was growing up. But I at least had some familiarity with Super Friends. But over the course of doing this podcast, I watched not all of the episodes, but I watched, I'd say, virtually all of the Superman-centric ones. And so I definitely got a good feel for the show generally and for the show's handling of Superman. And even though I don't have the personal attachment to it, so I only got so much mileage out of it, I could so appreciate how someone growing up watching that, how it would resonate with them, and how it would, be such an indelible part of, of the fandom.
Yeah, and looking back at it now, you think, wow, how bad was that animation? And it's so stilted, and especially when you reference it to the Fleischer Superman cartoons, which was so many years earlier, yet were so much better. You're very impressionable at that young age when you're watching cartoons. And it wasn't just Super Friends. There were many other cartoons of the time that it really had an impact on me. And, growing up, there were different things. But I think definitely what solidified my fandom was then the Christopher Reeve films, which were like, a live action version of all the cartoons that I'd seen. And we're just like, wow, how brilliant is this? So, yeah, I definitely think that had a massive impression on me, but it was because of those early cartoons that I even knew who Superman was.
Gotcha. Now, I think we're kindred spirits in a sense. My audience is well familiar with this, that the Death of Superman comic book storyline was my entry point into all of this. And I understand that Roger Stern's Death and Life of Superman novel was a major turning point for you.
100%. So as a young adult, I was very much an avid reader. I was reading Stephen King and Dean Koontz and, all these great authors. I couldn't get enough of reading. When I discovered, some of these great novels that are out there that, as a young person I could just get into, and they seemed to be directed towards my, where I was at my level of reading. I would be scouring the bookstores on my way to work. I'd get off the train, and on my way through, as I was walking, there would be this bookstore, and I would always stop and have a look at it and just peruse the shelves to see what was new and what would catch my eye. And there was that Bleeding S logo on the front of the novel, and I was like, oh, wow. And I just immediately picked it up, read it, and then I loved it. Absolutely, was just immersed in it. And then I got to the back of the book, and there was this advertisement for comic books. You know, get your weekly fix of Superman comic books at your local store. And I went, wow, I wonder if there are comic book stores anywhere near where I live. Because I'd grown up reading Mad Magazine and, you know, but I'd never read comic books before. I'd had some just fall into my lap from friends, or, you know, they just seemed to be laying around, but I'd never gone out and purposely bought a comic book for myself. And so as an extension of reading that novel, I went and found this local comic book store, bought a number of issues that were just on the shelf at the time, had no idea what I was doing or what titles there were available, and started slowly catching up to where I was at. Went back a couple of years to try to see where the Death of Superman had ended and what had happened after that, to be able to catch up from what I knew of those stories. And as they say, the rest is history.
Amazing. So I'm holding the novel here, and please don't end the episode right here. I do have a confession. I've never read it, but I intend. So here's the thing. It was always kind of on the periphery. I knew it was out there, but as a kid, I just wasn't, I guess I wasn't seeking it out per se. I got my fix through the comics. And then as I got older, I suppose I kind of just lost track of it. And then a few years ago, a buddy of mine from Fat Moose Comics, shout out to Sean, gave me a copy of this. And so I've had it on my shelf for the past few years. And at this point now, I feel like I'm kind of saving it because it's really one of the last pieces, if not the last piece, I would say, of the Death of Superman that I haven't really experienced. And so I'm getting there, and we'll do an episode on it, and it'll be special, and we'll make a whole thing out of it. But I haven't read it, but I will, and I'm particularly excited. I mean, I love Roger Stern. I loved his run on Action, and I saw exactly that ad that you were talking about at the back of the book. Superman's never-ending battle rages on each week, and then there's a little tear-off, and you can select which titles you want. $18 for 12 issues. And yeah, it's great. You have Action, Superman, Adventures, Superman, the Man of Steel. I mean, it's great.
It's awesome. And if that hadn't been in there, I might not have gone on the journey that I did and sought out a comic book store, because to me, it was just like, this is a book I want to read. I've read it, and that would have been the end of it. But because of that ad at the back of that commercial, the back of the book, yeah, it all happened from there.
Do you happen to remember the specific issues or storyline in the comics that were at the shop on the shelf when you went in after the novel?
Yeah, I remember around the time was, I think it was just before the Death of Clark Kent storyline, which was like, oh, how many deaths can they have? Like, what's going on here? But yeah, there was also that early time when Superman was masquerading as a firefighter, I think. And so, yeah, I wasn't sure what was going on, because it was just a lot had changed from the stories that I knew of Clark Kent and Superman. And so it took me a little bit to catch up. But, how enjoyable was that, being able to dive into a whole world of characters and information that you were just like, wow, I didn't realize there was such a rich history here.
That's the thing. And you said it before, 85 years across media. So there's so much. And I want to circle back obviously to the site itself, but just in terms of your fandom, one of the things that we talk about a lot here and that I think about a lot are gaps, right? Gaps in our fandom. And that was one of the reasons why I started this in the first place, was because I knew there were, as much as I had followed this character my whole life, there were so many stories in different media that I had just never experienced. And they were just kind of out there in the ether. And I said, I want to immerse myself in as much of this as possible. And it has been endlessly rewarding. So I'm curious, given your tenure now as a Superman fan and running this site, I would imagine there's probably not a ton of gaps left, but what gaps might remain for someone in your position?
Definitely there are gaps because there's only so much money that you can spend on these things. And, I've probably spent too much as it is already, but it's for me, it's probably the Silver Age and Golden Age comic books because as much as I would like to and have every issue of every comic ever published, that's pretty much impossible at this point in time. Obviously, there are digital and everything like that you can, thank God, go back and be able to read and look at things that are not necessarily readily available physically anymore. But yeah, that'd probably be the gaps in mine would be the later Golden Age and a fair bit of the Silver Age. There is so much great wealth of material there, especially the Silver Age, looking at all the characters that were created and all the things that we now take for granted as being part of the Superman world that came from that era. But I don't have a lot of those comics in my collection. But so if there was a gap at all, that would probably be where I would aim at that. But it's funny that you mention how there is so much out there. And as soon as I became immersed in looking for Superman things, it's amazing how our eye catches that symbol no matter where we are. Like there'll be a million people in a crowd and you'll spot the person wearing a Superman shirt. I'll be just, perusing the aisles of a shopping mall or whatever, and I'll see the Superman action figure. My eye just is drawn to that S symbol. And so it was through that being able to identify that symbol that I found the Fleischer cartoons in a VHS cassette tape at, back when we had VHS stores and, Blockbuster and all those kind of things. And it's like, wow, what are these? And then put those, rented that VHS and put that in. It was like, how awesome are they? 1941? Wow. It was just like blew my mind. And then that took me to the radio series. And it's like, there's so many, like over a decade of Superman radio series. And I was just immersed in listening to those. And that just blew me away.
Do you have an estimate? How many of those did you make your way through of the radio episodes?
All of them.
You did all of them. Good man. That's amazing. It was really cool. So for me, at the time when I had, found the Superman radio series, I would go and pick up my wife from work, and that was a 15-minute drive, and I would fit a 15-minute episode in the car, so it was like 5 days a week. I'd just be listening to a radio episode for years and years and years on end. And then it was just, part of my day. And it was just an awesome part of my day because for me, and I've said this many times, Clayton Bud Collier is my favorite Superman, bar none. I mean, Christopher Reeve obviously is up there, and Brandon Routh and Henry Cavill, they're all great. But for me, nobody embodied Superman like Bud Collier did through both the Fleischer and the radio series. No, I hear you. And it's interesting because you hear a similar sentiment among Batman fans, right? Whenever people are talking about their favorite Batman actor, and then someone will say, well, the right answer is Kevin Conroy, right? So there's something to be said, right, for these vocal performers. But that's amazing. It's funny because the radio show is one of those things where I say to myself now, there's no way I'll ever make my way through all of them. I'll probably pick and choose. And I've dabbled a little bit so far. But then it's funny because when I started this podcast, in my head, I was like, okay, I can't cover everything, right? So I'm just going to focus on the things that I'm most interested in. But as now the years have gone on, I guess what's happened is I've gotten more and more interested in all aspects. So there are things I've covered that I didn't, at the outset, I don't know that I necessarily thought I'll do Super Friends coverage, right? And then I did. So, and there have been various things like that. So it's funny. I would talk about the radio show now, and in another year or so, I'll have a whole run of episodes where I'll be listening to all of them.
Well, you should, because for the way Superman is portrayed now with that dual identity, it's because of Bud Collier. The fact that Superman has a lighter voice, a higher octave, and then Superman is that deeper baritone type of thing. That all comes from Bud Collier. Christopher Reeve embodied that when he did that scene in Superman the movie where he takes off his glasses and he stands up and, his posture changes. That's a physical embodiment of what Collier did as far as showing us that there was a mild-mannered reporter to the bold Superman. And there is a particular episode, and I used this in a recent presentation that I did at a comic convention recently. There's an episode where Clark Kent, Jimmy Olsen, and another young kid called Pug are in a cave, in a dungeon, and the candle that they have to keep them, to see goes out. And so Clark uses that as an opportunity, because nobody can see anything, to introduce Superman into the situation. And he is literally talking to himself, Clark Kent and Superman, in the two different voices that he does. And Jimmy and Pug just think that Superman has entered into the cave, and they don't realize that it's just Clark doing both voices, because they can't see anything. And you've got to remember that this is in a time when we didn't have editing. There wasn't, most episodes were done live. So he's doing that on the spot. It just blows my mind.
No, that's absolutely tremendous. And I know certainly the radio show was such a huge inspiration for the George Reeves Adventures of Superman series. And I know I watched the YouTube live that you just did with fellow Superman podcaster Michael Bailey, and you guys did a wonderful remembrance of Phyllis Coates, who recently passed. So I'm curious when you encountered Adventures of Superman and what your impressions were of that.
Yeah, so my dad was a big fan of the George Reeves series. Like, he would, always, through the Christopher Reeve films, would always say to me things like, "Oh, it's, I remember the old Superman black and white TV series." And even though it was shot in color for the second and the sixth seasons, most people only ever saw it in black and white, because our TVs at the time were only black and white back in the 50s. So not that I was there, but I'm just kind of, I don't want to, again, not that old. But so he would always talk to me about those. And so when they became available to watch on DVD, I would take them over to my dad's house and watch episodes with him. And it would just take him back to when he first saw them. And he absolutely loved them. And I couldn't get enough of that intro, with the faster than a speeding ball, more powerful than a locomotive, able to leap tall buildings at a single bound. And it just was like, this resonates with me. I just love that, because it was very much like the radio series, so it just, and I'd seen episodes here and there everywhere throughout the years, but being able to watch them from the very beginning and see all 6 seasons, that was just phenomenal. And then seeing them in color was just like, wow, what foresight, even though they knew most people wouldn't be able to see them in color, to then go, we're going to film them in color, and, eventually they'll be seen in color. That takes some guts.
Yes, very forward thinking for sure. Well, we'll talk off mic, but I do a whole Adventures of Superman rewatch podcast, and if you're game, I'd love to have you on for that. We'll be starting up season 2 not too long from now.
Nice.
But, you mentioned getting the DVDs, right, for Adventures of Superman, and just kind of this larger idea about availability. Like you mentioned, the Silver Age comics. I'm delighted that DC is finally putting out a Superman in the Silver Age omnibus in the relatively near future. And it's one of those things where it's kind of astounding to me that didn't already exist. I'm glad that it's coming. And similarly with Adventures of Superman, access to it, I mean, I have the DVDs, but access to it is an issue, because they're most, if not all, of the seasons are out of print at this point, and it's been quite a few years now since they initially put them out. They were on the DC Universe app when it first launched, and then they didn't make their way over to HBO Max, that whole business. So, availability is a big thing. And I know that period of time when Superman Returns was coming out was huge in terms of just getting content out there. Do you have hopes / expectations / predictions about what we might see as another new iteration of Superman on the big screen approaches, if that might have a similar effect?
Yeah, hopefully it does, because, as you say, when Superman Returns came out, we were getting inundated with, to see the Kirk Alyn serials, 1948, 1950, released. The 1961 never released Superboy pilot, becoming available, and the Super Pup, for what they're worth. It was just one of those things that everyone had spoke about in the collection, in the collector's world, but had never seen or had a really bad print of. So yeah, hopefully when Superman Legacy comes out, we'll get a influx of things that, at this point in time, what is there that hasn't been released other than maybe the Superboy segments of the new Adventures of Superman cartoons? We're still kind of waiting for those. During that time, over the last 20 years, we've obviously had the legal issues with the Siegel family and Schusters and that, whether or not that played into whether Superboy could be released or whether they decided, not to put them into the New Adventures of Superman releases. I don't know. But yeah, there's not too much material at this point in time that hasn't been put out there that, we would like to see. But there's always new mediums, upscaling things into 4K or whatever they might be able to do. They're always putting out different iterations of Superman the movie and the Superman and the Christopher Reeve films. It's like, how many box sets can we have of those things? Extended versions and international cuts and what have you. So hopefully Superman Legacy brings a whole new generation of fans to Superman so that they can go, wow, 85 years of history, what can I immerse myself into?
Yeah, I would absolutely love to see that. I hope that proves to be the case. So I guess on this note of gaps, I know you mentioned on the comics front, and then as far as other media, I mean, given that you've listened to all the radio episodes, I assume you probably watched and have listened to everything as far as other media adaptations of the character. Is there anything that is still out there that you haven't really delved into?
Not that I can think of. And now when I say I've listened to all the radio episodes, sadly, a lot of them through the war era do not exist anymore. And maybe at one point they will find something or somehow, in an archive somewhere. There's, from an Australian point of view, there was an Australian radio series that was done, I think in the early 60s, and only like maybe 4 or 5 episodes are available online. And I know they exist in an archive here, but they just won't release them. And I've tried to contact them to see if we can, do something and put out a CD or something of them. And so that's probably one, just from an Australian point of view, that I think would be interesting to see. But no, I've pretty much seen, the serials, all the Adventures of Superman, 1950s TV show, all the Christopher Reeve films, the Super Friends. I can't think of anything that's a massive gap in the visual or audio medium that I haven't seen. Even down to some of the audio books and the recent, like the BBC versions of the Death of Superman audio dramatizations. They were awesome. And if you like the radio series, or if audio is something that you think you might be able to get into, check out a lot of the audio books that are available, audio dramatizations of the Justice League and Superman things that have been released. Because, as they say in the promotions, it's a movie in your mind. You get to visualize internally what these voices and these sounds are portraying.
No, that's a great point. I've actually had a number of listeners recommend those audio dramatizations, and they're on my list. I haven't delved in yet, but I will. And what I will say, as far as my limited experience with the radio show, but I have listened to, Clan of the Fiery Cross in particular.
Yeah.
And what's, certainly I know that's the heavy hitter. I know a lot of people, that's the one we gravitate towards. And it was, really fascinating to listen to. And I think what really struck me was, again, I love the George Reeves show, right? But you watch it and it is a product of its time. When you listen to the radio serial, or I suppose any of these dramatizations, because so much of it relies on what you picture in your mind, there's a timelessness to it, right? That transcends the period in which it's made. And there's something really, really cool about that.
Yeah, and obviously the radio series and even the audio dramatizations are a period of their time, because with a character like Superman who is, Clark Kent at a newspaper offices and typewriters, computers, even phones, these days, obviously we're with our phone 24/7. It's part of us. We very rarely don't take it anywhere, including the bathroom. So it's, and then you look at Superman's world and he's like, I've got to get to a phone booth to be able to call in this story, or, to Perry White. And it's like obviously a product of its time. So it's really interesting. Even the phone booth itself, we know Clark Kent changes into Superman in a phone booth. Try find one these days.
But yeah, no, absolutely. No, that's true. I mean, certainly there are aspects that date it, but I guess just in terms of the production value, right? It's not like there are limitations in special effects, right? Because you're picturing it. But yeah, it's really.
But even then, you think about, sorry, just to interrupt, you think about period pieces like movies that are set in, we're always looking at gangster films, and we're always looking at, films, the cowboy films, and what. Just because they're set in a particular time doesn't mean we can't enjoy them as a modern day audience. Period pieces are enjoyable for a reason, because of the limitations or because of the way people dressed or the way people spoke. There's something to be said about being able to go back and enjoy those time periods for what they were.
Yeah, it really can transport you. And that's one of the things in really discovering the Adventures of Superman series that I've loved so much. I never really bump up against any of the limitations in terms of technology or effects or again, just any of those aspects that point to that period of time. Because it really just takes you back and you immerse yourself in that world. This episode made possible in part by educator, hobby comic book collector, and pop culture enthusiast Sam Lim. Sam is based in the South Jersey area and is looking to connect with other comics fans as well as retailers. They're also looking for comic shops to explore, so recommendations are welcome. Be sure to follow Sam on Instagram at SZL Comics to see their latest comic pickups and shop adventures. We reference the television series Smallville a lot around here, and there's one Smallville Rewatch podcast that's always at the top of my queue. Always Hold On to Smallville, hosted by our pal, Zach Moore. Zach and his guests bring tremendous insight, passion, and humor as they discuss each and every episode of the series that ushered in the renaissance of superhero TV. Listen to Always Hold On to Smallville wherever you get podcasts, and keep an eye out for the other shows under the Always Hold On to banner, including Arrow, DC's Legends of Tomorrow, Superman and Lois, and Star Wars. Filmmakers and movie fans alike should be sure to attend these film festivals: Brightside Tavern in Jersey City, Hang On to Your Shorts in Asbury Park, Point Lookout on Long Island, and Round Reel in Bloomfield, New Jersey. Take it from an alum of two of them. Submission information for filmmakers, as well as details about the festivals, can be found at filmfreeway.com. Follow the festivals on social media for news about events, discounts, tickets, and more. Also, listen to the Hang On to Your Shorts and Cullen on Film podcasts available via a shared universe network. So again, we've talked about this idea of gaps, but now I want to kind of pivot to the other side of that, which is this idea of the pillars or the tent poles that kind of hold up your fandom. Like I always talk on this show about the death of Superman and Smallville and Man of Steel as kind of three key pillars for me that kind of, and there's so much more that I enjoy, but those were so formative for me at different times in different ways. So I'm curious for you, and I know you've probably already identified a number of them already when you were recounting the origins of your fan journey, but at this point, with all that you've consumed, all you've seen, read, watched, listened to, what do you kind of hold up as maybe those, I don't know, 3 or 4, real pillars of your fandom?
Well, definitely, as I said, the early Saturday morning cartoons were the first pillar. Then the Christopher Reeve films, very much a very strong, formidable pillar in my growth as a Superman fan. And then, the comic books, reading those and immersing, buying, bagging and boxing comic books became such a thing for so long until I went digital. And that was like ripping off a Band-Aid. Like it hurt at the time, but I got to do it kind of thing. And, yeah, the man, Brandon Routh, Superman Returns, for me, because it was filmed here in Australia, was very much finally something is coming to this side of the world, because I always felt so isolated over here. I couldn't, get to certain things at comic conventions. I'd been to San Diego Comic-Con once, and, that made me feel like really isolated because I want to be here every year, but I can't. So when Superman Returns was filmed here, that was a big deal for me. And then Man of Steel, being able to be invited to the world premiere in New York and getting invited to the after party and rubbing shoulders with all the stars of the film, that was like, yes, I finally made it in some way, because to get that recognition from Warner Brothers to invite you to be part of that was just like, they actually, what I do matters. So that was a real, big moment for me too. So yeah, that's the 3 or 4 that I would, just off the top of my head.
No, I mean, I can imagine what a galvanizing moment that would be to get that official recognition, right? I mean, it's one thing to have people visiting the site, and that's wonderful, of course, but then to also get that other side of it. And I know you wrote about this on your website, but the moment with Henry Cavill where he shared, you want to tell the story?
Which one? Tell me. You tell
there
it. It might be interesting to. It might be interesting to hear it from your perspective.
No, about him telling you that your site was the one that he visited.
Yeah. So yeah, at the after party, we got to. It was not easy to get to Henry Cavill at that. He had his entourage and a few, big burly guys standing around where he was sitting to, keep people away, kind of thing. Not that there was a massive crowd or anybody who was there wasn't invited to be there, but still he's an important person, so I understand that. And so we got to chat with him, and whether or not it was just a token thing that he said, but it was like very nice of him to say, "Yeah, I love your website. It's the only one I visit to check things out on what's going on with Superman," and that was nice. And I've met him a couple of times since then, and he's always had that recognition of, I know who you are kind of thing in his eye when you're speaking to him. So if I have to say one thing about any of the Superman actors that I have met, they so embody who the character is. Like from Brandon Routh, I've spent hours chatting with him in different points of time, and him and Henry have that spirit of generosity about them, that they are very genuine and down to earth, and it's just they don't have to be like the character. They're actors. It's a role that they play. But the fact that they choose to be, or that they are naturally like that, just kind of warms your heart as a Superman fan. Because I have come across some actors. I mean, in modern times, Dean Cain's let down a lot of Superman fans just because of his political views or the things that he's outspoken about. I remember having a run-in with Gerard Christopher back in the day, who has mellowed over the years, I should say. But at one point in time, he was very confrontational and antagonistic towards me about trying to get an interview with him, and it was like, what's in it for me kind of thing. But the fact that Henry and Brandon were both very much down to earth and just humble people kind of was like, it was really rewarding to see that from a person that you looked up to, even though they're probably both younger than me.
No, that's great to hear. And I will say, having never met Henry Cavill, but in terms of his geek cred, he seems genuine, and I know he's a big gamer and he's into all this stuff. So I don't know. Yeah, maybe it was something he said, but for him to say that he visits the site, I don't know. I choose to believe it. I feel like that was genuine.
Yeah. I don't think he would say that if he hadn't. It doesn't seem that it would be something he would do.
And I guess my point is, given his interest in gaming and everything else, I feel like for him to say that, it's like, yeah, no, I like that tracks as far as what you might expect from him. So
he builds his own computers, so he's that's how geeky he is. Yes. And the Warhammer things that he, little figures that he, wow.
So huge Smallville fan over here. Any experiences with Tom Welling?
Not Tom himself, but met Michael Rosenbaum and Alison Mack, for what it's worth. And so from Tom Welling's point of view, I was always disappointed to hear that the whole no flights, no tights thing was his doing, and that he was the one who, was adamant that would be held in place for as long as he played the character. And I get that, there's that whole worry about being typecast, but I think after 10 seasons of playing a character, you are going to be typecast, no matter whether you put the suit on or not. He's always going to be known as Clark Kent in Smallville. But I understand where he was coming from at the time. He was a young man and he was trying to look after himself. But no, I've only heard good things about people who have met him and who have interviewed him, and I think he has mellowed over the years in his stance towards the character because, hey, it's a gravy train. Why not ride it? It's going to take you places. And I feel sorry for people like George Reeves, who at the time hated playing Superman and saw it as a failure on his part. If only he'd lived a lot longer to see just the indelible impact that he had on so many people's lives that, like that Noel Neill and Jack Larson got to enjoy.
It's so true. I mean, having now gotten a fair sense of the Adventures of Superman fandom that's out there, I mean, there is a whole contingent of fans for whom George Reeves is the Superman, and there is none other. So it's
so funny. I wonder if the internet had existed back then when Christopher Reeve first was cast as Superman, how many fans there would have been going, he's not Superman, he doesn't look the part, and because they were George Reeves fans, just like we had when Henry Cavill was cast and everyone was like, no, Christopher Reeve is the only one true Superman. It's just like, yeah, it would have been interesting to see how fans would have reacted had there been an internet back in 1978, 79.
No, very true. And look, with Tom Welling, it's one of those things that the no flights, no tights. I support his decision like all the way up until the final minutes. I feel like if there was ever, that was the time though. That was the time where there were certain things that I really needed to see to stick the landing, pun intended. And so I feel like, again, it's number one in my heart. I love Smallville endlessly, but it will always have that little asterisk next to it, and the finale, at least because of that.
Yeah, 100%. I think the fact that they got to have a proper finale and didn't do what the fans had hoped they would, that leaves a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. I mean, look at Lois and Clark. It went for 4 seasons and it didn't get to do the ending that they wanted. It was left on a cliffhanger that people still, to this day, debate what would have happened or where would it have gone. But with Smallville, they've got to the finale that they'd aimed to achieve. And for many fans, not having him fully immersed in that suit, we got some pretty dodgy CGI in the distance kind of thing. That felt like a bit of a kick to the guts.
Yes, to put it mildly, but we've hopefully made our peace with it as much as we can. Over the years, and I think you and Michael were talking about this recently, where with the internet, and I think just with the passage of time and certain age groups now, entering adulthood and middle age, I feel like you're seeing a lot of conversation around, various projects or eras or iterations of the character, and each really seems to have its contingent of fans, whether it's the Superboy TV series or Lois and Clark, certainly Smallville, right? But I think that's a heavier hitter where you would kind of expect to see that. But even there, like the level of discourse around it now really feels like, and I guess aided in part by the fact that you have stars from the show doing their own rewatch podcasts and all of that. But I'm just curious what the experience has been like for you seeing that over the past few years. And is there anything and this is not to slight any of these things, but is there anything where you say to yourself, wow, like I'm surprised X has like that many fans or there's that much conversation about this?
No, nothing surprises me anymore because I've been there, done that now with every version of the character that's come out since I've been doing this. And it's just like Michael and I, we've been doing our show for 12 years now in different versions. We've been here before. We went through, when Superman Returns came out and fans were, rabid about this movie, and then Man of Steel and, Smallville and, Lois and Clark was kind of, we're at the, end of that. But, and then now Superman and Lois, nothing surprises me anymore because it just can, if anything surprised me was that the new animated series, My Adventures with Superman, really took off in a way that I didn't think it would because, being at a midnight time slot on Adult Swim, didn't get released, hasn't been released here in Australia, only now has gotten released in the UK. I was surprised at how much of a younger audience it brought into the world of Superman, especially with its anime type of feel and so many fans connecting with the designs, of course, of it from a younger audience point of view. That really surprised me at how well that took off and how well it was received and how many new Superman fans it brought in. So, that's been pleasing.
I do have some more questions that kind of about your take on the fandom generally and all of that, but I do want to circle back to the website. So I know that I suppose it was the mid 90s where you became friendly with Andrew Gould, who had originally started Superman homepage. How did that relationship develop?
Yeah, it's funny when I think back now because the internet was really in its infancy. There wasn't much it could do, and the Superman homepage was named because that's what it was. It was a home page. That's all there was. There was, I think, maybe 2 other pages. For some reason, he had really gotten into, I think, REM's song Superman had come out at that time. So he had a page with the lyrics for that song. And I'm a graphic designer by profession, so I had just discovered the internet and the World Wide Web at that time, and was really getting into HTML and how to, just seeing that as a new, way forward for me from a business point of view. And so, having read that novel, The Life and Death of Superman, I started looking online for Superman things. And when I say online, we didn't even say online back then. It was just like I was getting onto the World Wide Web with my dial-up modem to be able to, look for things. And the Superman homepage was one of the things I found, and it was just very much black text on a grey screen. That's all it was. And a few little graphics up in the top corners. And being a graphic designer, I sent him an email saying, listen, I'm a Superman fan, I'm a graphic designer, would you like me to create some graphics for you? Because I'd done a few things here and there in Illustrator at the time that I thought he might like and might be able to put up. And I was experimenting with animated GIFs. So I was, which were very new at that time. And so I put a few of them forward to him. And we just started chatting about Superman through email, just back and forth. And then it was over that period of time, that 1.5 to 2 year period, that I contributed a few things to what he was doing. And he had he confided in me that he had suffered from a rare genetic skin disease that predisposed him to cancer, skin cancer, and was really only had months to live, and they was going to have to shut down the website or the homepage. And I said to him, obviously was devastated to hear that, and asked him if he'd like me to continue it on for him. And I said, I'm sure I could check in on it from, 1 day a week. And he's like, 1 day a week? I think it's going to take a bit more time than that. I went, sure, no problem. I'll manage, So we transferred the couple of files that he had across to me. And then I found out from his brother that he had passed away in 1996, which was the point when I took over the site. And from there, I just kept building and building and building. And what was 1 or 2 pages now is like thousands of pages, and has had dozens of contributors and people who have volunteered over the years to do things. And it's opened so many doors and taken me in so many different directions, and has become a side hustle, where I do it as a side project to my graphic design and web design work that spins a little bit of money through advertising and affiliate sales. But, I couldn't give up my job and do it full time, but it's I'd love to. Don't get me wrong, that would be really nice, but there's just not those opportunities.
Believe me, I can identify. I understand. But no, I love hearing that. And I love the way that you've honored Andrew on the website in your account of the history, because again, that was history that I was unfamiliar with. And so reading about it, was really interesting. And, it's amazing because I'm trying to think when I got on the web, I got online. I mean, it was probably past that point, past the point of you taking over. But so essentially for as long as I've been going on the internet, Superman homepage has been there. So it's amazing. And I guess, I have a number of questions, and some of them might be kind of nerdy, but I'm so curious about a lot of this. But one of them, kind of more on the personal front, is I love the way that relationship developed, that you reached out and it kind of grew from there. And I'm curious, and I know you have contributors on your site, and maybe it developed in a similar way. Like, have you had people reach out to you, and do you find you're more receptive to them because of the experience that you had on the other side of it?
Yeah, definitely. Early, back in the early days when guys like Neil Bailey and Adam DeChannel and Michael Bailey had reached out and, said, would you like some help? Or I'm a writer. Would you like me to, write an article? Or just submitted, an essay on something and said, hey, I wrote this review of this comic book, and I would read through it. And if they were good, I would say, yeah, that's great. And then we'd continue that conversation. And yeah, I definitely think having reached out to Andrew initially, I was, even back in those days, you weren't inundated with people contacting you. So it's not like we had social media back then. There was no Facebook, there was no Twitter, there was not even YouTube at the time. So it was like for people to reach out to you, we had message boards and things like that. So they were really interesting ways of being able to connect to people because, as I said, I'm out here in Australia. I'm on the other side of the world from most Superman fans. So it was great to be able to have people reach out to you. And so over those years, I formed some really great and long-lasting, life-lasting relationships with people. And Neil Bailey doesn't even write for the site anymore, but we are still best of friends and still touch base with each other and, are involved in each other's lives. And same with Michael Bailey. We just, we're friends first and foremost, and Superman fans second, and then working together on doing podcasts and things after that. But yeah, it's really been interesting the way things have, and people have come and gone. There were guys in the early days who were no longer Superman fans necessarily. They grew up and went on to other things, and we've lost base with it. Lost touch with each other. But that's probably been the best thing about running the Superman homepage is the friends that I've formed over that time.
Now, listen, I can 100% identify, I've become, really good friends with a number of the people, fellow Superman podcasters. And it's like, a lot of the people I have on the show are people I've known previously, but then there are a bunch of people who I've gotten to know through the process of doing this. And we might not have ever been in the same physical space face to face. It's all been virtual, but I genuinely consider them friends. And I look forward to hopefully an opportunity to get together, whether it's at a Superman celebration or a convention or something like that. Have you been to the Superman celebration?
Yes. So I've been to the Superman celebration 4 or 5 times now. It was every 5 years. I went first in, I think it was 2008 or 2003, and then 2008, where I met Michael Bailey and Neil Bailey in person. That was the very first time we'd actually met together physically. And then I went 2013 when Man of Steel was coming out, so I went straight from the Superman celebration to New York City for that, and that happened to time itself really well. And then 2018, and then I was supposed to go in this year, 2023, but with COVID and everything kind of still there, I didn't want it, international travel wasn't in the front of my mind, and I was like very much, what's the point now for me? The Superman celebration is great, don't get me wrong, I love it. And the people and the friends that I've made there are awesome. And I would go back in a minute if it wasn't a 13-hour flight, and more to get to from Australia, from Sydney to over there. And it's for those people that I would go back in a blink of an eye. But as far as from the Superman homepage point of view, now these days I feel like I'm preaching to the converted. There's not much point in being there and promoting the website when everybody there pretty much knows the website. In those early days, it was really awesome. I mean, I felt like a celebrity the first couple of times that I went to the Superman celebration. I had people coming up and asking for my autograph or can I take a photo with you? And I think it was because of the novelty that I was Australian and I was from the other side of the world. They'd only ever seen me on, video things or heard me on podcasts, what have you. So physically be there at the same time together was like a bit of a novelty. But over the years, as the website has become pretty much well known, it hasn't become necessarily, for me, I would rather do more local conventions where people might not know about the Superman homepage, that I can reach a new audience. So for the cost, and that's the big thing, it's how expensive it is to get flights and accommodation and that. And it's only it's now a 3-day, it used to be a 4-day celebration. To only go there for 3 days and then come back, it seems like an exorbitant cost to try to be able to, justify that.
No, I understand, and again, I can identify with what you're talking about. I was recognized one time at one convention for my podcast stuff, and it made the whole convention. I was like, this is great. So no, it's very cool, and speaking of your contributors, one of the things that I love about your site is, yes, you're covering all of the Superman news, right? That's coming out, but it's such a great resource and time capsule. And again, even as I've been going through the Adventures of Superman, I often go to your site and read reviews that are there. So, I mean, that's the thing. You have episode guides, you have reviews for all of these shows. So there's so much on the site beyond quote unquote, just the news that's breaking. Like it's this wonderful compendium of, again, of all of these guides and reviews and just information about the character. It's fantastic.
Yeah, that's been something that, has always been part of the charter to do the Superman homepage, is to make it, and then when Wikipedia came about and it was just like, oh my God, they're doing it at a better, they got people contributing from all around the world, at any hour of the day. And it's not always on the money. It's not always correct information on Wikipedia because anybody can edit that and has gotten better over the years. But for me, it was always about, look, let's be a time capsule, as you said, for all the different things that have happened through the world of Superman and archive all the news and have everything that there, so that at a blink of an eye, you can go back and say, well, what did we do then, or what happened then? And it's been really interesting to go back and revisit old articles. And, I've tried to get into a bit of SEO with search engine optimization in recent times to try to drive more traffic to the site. And one of the things that I keep hearing from these people is like, you need to go back and refresh old articles and, and try to have a look at that. And you can get caught in the trap of that's yesterday's news. We don't need to look at that. But it's been really interesting. I mean, just now, recently this week, with the Smallville having its 22-year anniversary, 2 years ago, we did a 20-year retrospective. And I went, well, there's no reason I can't just update this to 22-year retrospective and just republish it again. And people who weren't necessarily didn't see it at the time will find it again for the 22-year anniversary. And it's like, yeah, there's a lot, like you said, there's such a resource of information there. Don't just leave it lagging, sitting there untouched. Update some of it. And that's a bit daunting because there are, we've been around since 1994. So 1996, when I kind of took over, was when it started booming with all the different pages and new information. It's like, do I really want to go back that many years and have a look at what I did back then, or should I just let it sit?
Well, so that actually kind of leads to maybe one of the nerdier questions that I had, which is, I'm so curious what the rise of social media did in terms of how you go about your business and run the site. Because I mean, I would imagine posting right across social media becomes a key piece of this, but trying to get people to click to come back to the website, like how have you navigated that, and how substantially did that change the game?
So substantially. It's been a real tricky one because you think, wow, this is going to open up so many different avenues for people to come find the site. But people are so reluctant to do anything but read a headline these days that it becomes frustrating because you wouldn't believe the amount of times that so what I do, I post the news on the Superman homepage, and I have some automated stuff that will post it directly to Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. I've got a YouTube channel as well, obviously, and we do the community over there. There's Pinterest. Trying to keep up with all of them is impossible, but, you target the big ones and you put the headline with a link, hoping that people will click the link to read the rest of the story or to flush out the news of, what they want to read. And the amount of times that people would go on, say on Facebook, oh, when is this coming out? And I'll go, click the link, it's in the article. It's not that hard. Like you want to be spoon-fed? Some people don't even know that there is a Superman homepage website. They just think we are a Facebook group. It's just like, come on, people. Are we, so the harder you try, the more frustrating it becomes sometimes. I see you laughing because I'm guessing you've got a similar experience.
On multiple levels. So, so in my day job, I work at actually the law school that I attended, and I'm an administrator and a faculty advisor, and I teach. And let me just say that even law students require a lot of kind of delivering the same information many times over, right? So there's that. But then on the podcasting front, so this other show that I do, My Comic Shop History, is ending imminently. And I've been doing this show, Steve, for 8 years and 120 episodes. And recently I posted on the Facebook page, recording the series finale soon. And someone commented, and I thought it might have been a joke. I hope it was a joke, but it seemed serious, where he wrote, "You guys have a podcast?" And I'm like, that's been the whole thing. Like, that's all this page has been about for 8 years. And it's funny because I always, more so on my personal page, but I'm always trying to be mindful of, all right, don't beat people over the head with this. Like, they know, but it's like, no, there's no matter how many times they don't. So as you're saying I understand.
So you've really got to put in a call to action. Like, I used to just put the headline with the link. Now I say, put the headline and I say, to read the rest of the story, click this link or go to our website, as far as Instagram is concerned. I still don't understand why Instagram doesn't do links. But, so you've really got to spoon feed people to say what you want them to do and give them a call to action to say, here is the headline, but to read the rest of the article, visit our website at this link, because they just don't, for some reason. We are toddlers on the internet. We have a 2-second attention span, and unless you state the bleeding obvious, they won't do it.
Acme Comics is a locally owned and operated comic book store in Greensboro, North Carolina for people of all ages and walks of life. With more than 40 years and a new second location to its name, Acme is a multiple-time Eisner Award nominee. The shop features a significant contemporary and vintage selection, as the Acme team uses their collective knowledge and resources to connect you with the best material. Mail order subscriptions to new releases are available, and all offerings are available anywhere via mail order. Follow Acme on social media and eBay, listen to the Acme Cast on all podcast services, and visit acmecomics.com for much more. Aw Yeah Comics celebrates and promotes everything that is wonderful about comics, toys, artwork, and the joy they bring to people. Visit them in person at one of their 3 locations: Harrison, New York, aka my local comic shop, Skokie, Illinois, or Muncie, Indiana. If you have kids and have been looking for a family-friendly store, look no further. Join Aw Yeah for exciting events, including creator signings, how-tos, and more. Visit awyeahcomics.com and follow Aw Yeah on social media for more. Their name says exactly how they feel about it. Say it with me now. Aw yeah. Fat Moose Comics is New Jersey's best and oldest comic book store. Established in 1982 and under new ownership since 2020, Moose sells a wide selection of comics from every publisher and time period, along with action figures, graphic novels, posters, statues, and more. If you're looking for something and they don't have it, they can probably get it for you. They know a guy. Visit Fat Moose in Whippany the next time you're in the Garden State, and be sure to reach out via the Fat Moose Comics Facebook page. And again, I don't say this to blow smoke either, but I go to basically all of the comics news sites that you might expect, right? And I've noticed over the years, right, a decline in quality, I would say, in a lot of them, in terms of reporting, in terms of the clickbaity headlines, all the sorts of things, right? And I think one of the things that I have always enjoyed about your site, and I tip my hat to you, is that I feel that there has been a level of consistency and quality that has not always been emulated on some of the other sites. And I would imagine that that's a conscious effort, and I would imagine that it can be challenging because maybe the temptation could be sometimes to kind of, follow suit and maybe adopt some of these other practices that I think ultimately yield to lesser online journalism.
It's a real tricky one because you see all those clickbait headlines and they get so much traffic because that's what that's why they're called clickbait, is because people click on them. It's a lure for them to do that. But the falsification of information is so frustrating, and I don't understand. And I'm going to call some of these sites out, like Cosmic Book News, and I don't know what some of the other ones are, but they literally create crap. They make stuff up and they're just pulling them out of their backsides, and obviously they're false, and people say that's rubbish, that was proven false, but they just continue to do it and people just continue to visit. Do we have that short a memory that we don't realize that these sites are falsifying information and creating rubbish just for clickbait, that we continue to give them what they want, and that is traffic to their sites? And that's all they're out there doing. They earn money because the more people that visit their sites, the more people are seeing the ads that are on this display ads, the more money they make. And yet, time after time, you see these websites continue to do it, and they continue to get traffic. And I just think, that's not who I want to be, because 1 or 2 times that I have created a clickbaity type of headline, the amount of crap that I got in return for people, the comments that I received, the backlash, it was just like, it's not worth it. For the extra maybe 1,000 visitors that I received, the headaches that I got from people commenting and bashing me over the head for what I did was just like, nah, I don't want to do that anymore. It's not a good feeling.
No, I understand. I think, one of the other big frustrations I have, even from sites that I more or less trust the veracity of what they're writing, right? Something like We Got This Covered or Cosmic News, like I won't even touch those because I know they just flat out make stuff up. But even other sites where I feel like, okay, I'm confident enough that it's accurate information, but they so bury the lead, right? Because they want to keep you scrolling through. Yeah. And it drives me nuts. So my undergrad background was in journalism, and it's like, you don't bury the lead. Like you start with the most critical information, and it drives me crazy. to have to read. And and the sad thing is I've gotten to the point now where I'm so trained. There are Screen Rant, there are certain sites where it's like, I don't even consciously do it, but it's an automatic at this point where I'll just kind of like scroll down to the third paragraph because I know the first two are just BS setup.
Yep, 100%. And it seems to be more prevalent these days. Even sites like Comic Book Resources, which, is a very good, reputable site. And Jonah Wayland, who set it up around similar times in the late 90s when I was, doing the Superman homepage. I remember it was his Comic Book Resources back then. It's obviously been bought out by a conglomerate now and has done really well. But, same thing. You see just a lot of fluff before you get to the actual information. And unfortunately, these days with AI and ChatGPT, a lot of the articles that you're seeing are just generated by an algorithm or, by an AI bot. And they have their place. It's a great tool to be used, but you can't just use it without vetting the information and being an editor and looking over it. But, it's definitely an interesting time to be in journalism.
Absolutely. We've talked about kind of this, how rewarding it has been, connecting with fellow Superman podcasters, for example. I'm curious, in your experience, less so on the podcasting front, but more just in terms of other fan sites, like you mentioned, Jonah in particular from CBR. And again, I know, like you said, that's been bought out and everything, but I'm curious what you've experienced generally kind of on that front in terms of camaraderie, if any, among people in your position running these fan sites, Superman or otherwise, because certainly there are plenty out there.
Yeah, it's really funny that you asked that question because I found it to be really tricky. I tried to create a Facebook group where people in my position who are running other fan sites, not necessarily Superman, could maybe come together and share experiences and pitfalls and things you should look out for, or, come to it for advice, how do I get around this? Or what do you use? What tools do you use? From WordPress plugins, all different things that you might be able. And that lost traction. Maybe like 3 or 4 people out of a dozen that I'd invited. It was like, as I was saying to you at the beginning of this podcast, it was like we were competitors and we shouldn't be helping each other and shouldn't be giving advice to each other. It's like, why? If you're running a Batman site and I'm running a Superman site, we're not really competitors. So, and even if we're running Superman sites together, and I've had, been friends with Neil Cole, who runs a Superman super site, and, we've had, some to and fro's where, there's been some interesting confrontations about, who got what information first, or, did you take this from my website kind of thing. That, they're pitfalls that you can fall into. But, non-competitive websites, Spider-Man websites, Harry Potter websites, if you're running that, why can't we be in a group or help each other where we can give advice or go to other people for advice, because we're all plowing the same field but just reaping different rewards. So, I don't get it. But, yeah, unfortunately there is that kind of standoffish approach amongst people who run different fan sites. It's like, no, these are my secrets. I don't want you, stay out of my garden. I don't want you to see what I'm doing here.
It's discouraging to hear that. I guess I'm not shocked, but it's, going back to kind of where we started, and, we just passed the hour mark. I don't want to, monopolize your time. So, we can certainly wind down. I have a few more questions if you're game for that, but if we need to cut it, you just let me know.
No, that's cool.
But it's something that I always try to be very, just kind of in terms of fandom generally, I've always tried to be very mindful of this since I started, of everyone brings their own experience to whatever it is that we're talking about. And so I always couch any opinion I'm expressing, right? I always couch it in terms of, hey, this is how I feel. Like, I grew up watching Smallville. I was a freshman in high school when Clark was a freshman in high school, and I watched it every week through a very formative decade of my life. So I have a level of attachment to that show that I understand someone watching that cold, in 2023 as a 35-year-old, wouldn't receive it in the same way, right? And that's something I love. And then there are things that maybe I haven't been as receptive to for various reasons, but I recognize someone who experienced it at a different time. It could have meant something so fundamental to them, right? So I think that's important. And I'm always happy when I encounter, audience members here who kind of, who get that, right? And reciprocate that we all, we all have our own experience with this material. But then, going back to where you had mentioned this earlier, kind of the fractured nature of the fandom at times, where people so, kind of dig in with these respective positions, and, sometimes other perspectives might get a little bit lost. This is kind of a big and not particularly well formulated question, but I guess wherever you want to take this, what trends, maybe I'll frame it that way, like what trends have you observed? I mean, I would imagine it's been particularly over this post Man of Steel decade where it's become more pronounced, but I'm just curious, like what you've sensed and, within the fandom.
What I've always found tricky and frustrating is you're saying, like, we all have different opinions on different things, but for me, having an opinion that differs to yours is not me saying that your opinion is wrong or that you're an idiot for having that opinion. It's not a challenge to you. If I like chocolate and you like vanilla, great, so be it. I'm not saying vanilla is bad. I'm just saying I like chocolate, and it shouldn't be a challenge for you then to try to convince me that vanilla is better. It's just people have different opinions, and people need to understand, and they never will because it's human nature, but having an opinion is not automatically a dig at somebody else who has a different opinion. So if you go online and you see someone who says, I love Henry Cavill, he's my favorite Superman, they're not saying Christopher Reeve is a crappy Superman or a bad Superman. So you don't have to try to convince them otherwise. Just accept the fact that people have different opinions. If we all like the same things, what a boring world it would be.
I agree. And I won't go down the Snyderverse rabbit hole, but I will just say, I think that is a good example because I'm a fan. The audience knows this. I've talked about it a lot. But the thing that kind of irks me is when you have folks, I think on either extreme, folks who will argue that it's not a valid take on the character, or folks who argue that it's the only valid take on the character. And in both of those instances, I say to myself, well, okay, like neither one of those is the case, right? It's a take, and some will like it and some won't. And I agree with you wholeheartedly, right? It's not a personal attack, right? If I don't like I just got done with this huge run of Crisis events, and on social media, I posted my ranking of them. And, I had a couple of people, it was no, crazy reactions, but, a couple of people, I can't believe you put this there or that there. And I wrote back, I'm like, hey, they're just it's for me. It's in terms of the experience that I had in going through all these events. Like make your own list. Like I always say this to the audience. It's like, share yours, right? Like I rather, and I like what, and a lot of times people do this and it's great. It's like, share what your take is. It's not a matter of I'm right or wrong or whatever. It's like, just, we each have our own, and it's okay.
That's so true. And I wish more people thought like that, because it would be, but then we wouldn't have Facebook and Twitter, and, it'd be pretty boring if everyone just gave a thumbs up to everything we posted.
Very true. One of the other things that kind of more on the personal front, I guess, is, do you find that you are still able to maintain your level of excitement as a fan about all of these things? Because there's the component of, you're going to cover it on your site, right? But then you're also still going to experience it as a fan. I mean, do you find that, because I guess I was thinking about this for myself, where whenever something is announced, like my adventures with Superman or Superman and Lois, whatever, like I am excited to watch them as a fan, but I think neck and neck, and sometimes I don't know which one is in the lead, neck and neck is kind of like, okay, how am I going to cover this on the show? How many episodes? How am I going to talk about this? What's the angle going to be? Like, how do you navigate that?
Yeah, I think you just have to be in the moment. So when you definitely start thinking and planning for how we're going to attack writing reviews, who's going to be the reviewer, are we going to do this, are we going to do a podcast for every episode, things like that. You start thinking of that. But when I'm sitting down and watching an episode of Superman Lois, or when I'm sitting down watching my adventures with Superman, I'm totally immersed and just enjoying it as a fan there and then, and try not to and then I'll do a rewatch if I have to, if I need to capture something. But at the time, I'm just a fan, just watching it, like a little kid sitting there and just absorbing it all as a fan. And then later on, we'll get into, editor-in-chief mode.
Gotcha. And then I guess just as far as, I know you said this, you have your quote unquote day job and you run the site. I'm curious, just in terms of your personal life, like is Superman and this fandom, I mean, is this something that you're able to share with people in your, IRL, so to speak? Or yeah, I'm just curious what the experience has been.
Yeah, it's been a tricky one. My wife and I, she is very understanding of it. It's been a long time now. It's been so many. It's pretty much all of our marriage that I've been a Superman fan. So, and in doing the Superman homepage, we were married in '94, and I took over the website in '96. So it's been very much part of our lives, and our fridge is just filled with Superman magnets. The shelf in our TV room has got all the Superman DVDs and Blu-rays, and it stops at certain. There's nothing in our bedroom that kind of like no, I can't have Superman quilt cover and that kind of thing. But it's part and parcel of our daily lives. No one buys me Superman stuff anymore because they know I probably already have it. But every now and then I'll get a pair of Superman socks or something as a birthday gift, or Superman undies or whatever it might be that you can never have enough of. But and everyone in my circle of extended family and extended friends know that I'm the Superman guy, and so it's very rare that someone doesn't know that, and if they don't know it, I'm pretty quick to tell them.
It's hard to hide. But no, that's fantastic. I guess as we start to wind down here, again, we've talked about your fandom and the, not really so many gaps in your case at this point, and those pillars of the fandom. I guess I'm curious in terms of because it is such a vast mythology, right? For 85 years across time and media, are there certain, kind of overlooked gems that you feel that you find? And I know it's such a wide range of experience in terms of, people that you must interact with, but are there certain overlooked gems that you always kind of tell people, or you might tell people like, hey, you really should check this out. It might not get a lot of attention, but you might enjoy this.
Yeah, I think nowadays, early on, it was definitely the Fleischer cartoons because not a lot of people had even heard about them or known about them. And then the radio series. But as those have become more and more, I mean, everybody in the Superman world knows about the Fleischer cartoons now because, they've been released multiple times and now they're in the public domain and that kind of stuff. So people know about them, where maybe in the early years when I was doing the website, I didn't even know about them. They were a surprise to me. In this day and age, probably telling people to go back and watch things like maybe who'd missed out on Man of Steel at the time. Like a lot of my family members is like, yeah, never got around to watching them. It's like, no, you should. I think because we get inundated with superhero films now with all the Marvel movies and that, people just, I don't know if we definitely have superhero burnout, but there is definitely so much out there that a lot of people go, I've just lost track. I don't know where we're at with all these superhero movies. So I definitely say to them, no, you should check out Man of Steel if you never got around to watching it. I mean, at this point in time, it is 10 years ago. So, it's we can look back. And then there are, Smallville. A lot of people, maybe will go, 10 seasons. I don't know if I can add 20-something episodes per season. What's that all about? We only have 10 or 13 these days. It's like, that seems a lot. And there are a lot of filler episodes to, what we would call filler episodes. But, not too many things these days that people might not know about that I have to kind of bring to their attention.
Gotcha. And then as far as just kind of things that you're most excited about, I know you're keen on My Adventures with Superman, as am I. And of course we have Superman and Lois. We have the movie coming. I mean, I don't know. Again, thoughts, expectations, level of optimism as far as Superman Legacy. Where are you at this point?
Tentatively hopeful. I was very devastated for Henry Cavill, the way it all panned out, for him coming back, saying, I'm back, doing that Black Adam cameo, and then having the rug pulled out from underneath him. I thought that was really poorly handled by the powers that be. I definitely think that it is time for a new take. While I was very much a fan of what Zack Snyder did to some extent, I understand that I would like to see a more positive Superman or more positive world for Superman to exist in. So Henry Cavill's Superman was positive, don't get me wrong. I loved his take on the character. I would have liked to have seen him continue on playing the character with a more positive story around the character, him enjoying being Superman and people trusting him and loving him as Superman, where very much every film, Man of Steel was like, who is he? Should we trust him? Batman v Superman, Batman doesn't trust him. Justice League, oh, he's come back from the dead as do we trust him? It's like, come on, can we just trust him already and let him be Superman and enjoy being Superman and not have to always second guess himself? So I'm very much hopeful that the upcoming James Gunn Superman Legacy will have that element to it. I don't want it to be a rehash of the Richard Donner films, but I'd very much like to see it be a more positive, uplifting feel coming out of the film.
I'm with you. I'll co-sign on that. I'm really trying to be optimistic about all of this and keep an open mind, which I do think is an important point. And I preach that, so I want to try to live that as well. So we'll see. I mean, it should be an exciting time. One way or the other, it'll be a lot for us to unpack and talk about as more information and posters and trailers and then the eventual movie come out. So, it should be a lot of fun. Is there anything, and I don't say this with any expectation. If you don't have anything, that's fine. Is there anything that you wanted to ask me, or anything that we didn't talk about, anything I didn't ask you that you wanted to address?
No, I've got to give you props for how thorough you are in the questions that you asked and the preparation you did to ask me the questions that you did. And it's been really interesting for me to go back down memory lane and revisit some of those early days of running the website. And I can't think of anything that pops to mind. I enjoy what you do, and that's the reason I reached out to you, because I think that the following that you have and the people that you listen to you will probably resonate with what we do at the Superman homepage, and I think we're simpatico in that way. And I think it's great that there are so many podcasts out there that are doing things surrounding Superman and maybe focusing on different aspects of the character. And so, just more power to you. Keep it going.
No, I appreciate that. And that's the cool thing. I mean, I guess whether or not there are a lot of Superman podcasts, I guess it's relative. I mean, there are a bunch, right? But I do feel like we've each kind of carved our own path to some extent or another, and that there's space for everybody. And again, it's a testament to the character, right? That there are so many different tracks you can take in terms of tackling all of this. So no, it's been, one of our earliest episodes I had on Craig Byrne from the Krypton site website, and that was. Look, That was huge when I was watching Smallville and I was going to that site and I was reading spoilers and I was on the forum and having him on, it was like this surreal kind of experience because I was a little kid like going to his website. And a similar thing here, it's, not to say I'm starstruck, but there's a little bit of that. No. So, I so appreciate you reaching out and you taking the time to come on here. And I hope we get to do this again and we stay in touch and all of that. And I know we've been obviously talking about your site all the way through, but what would you like to direct people to? Because I know there's the site, there's the YouTube, there are various various avenues here. What would you like to share with folks?
No, just it's been a pleasure being on the podcast with you and be able to talk about the site and the time that I've spent running the site. Yeah, look, the website is the focus of everything that we do, and it is at the core of everything. We always obviously have our YouTube channel, which is big because we do our weekly Superman homepage live show, and I do the speeding bulletin over there. And there's so many. We've got our Facebook group and Facebook page and Twitter and Instagram and all that kind of stuff. But they all feed back into the Superman homepage website, and so everything is focused at the Superman homepage website. We try to cover everything that's Superman related: news, reviews, rumors, what have you. But we also do some of our own content, like I said, with the speeding bulletin and the Superman homepage live. We're currently doing like a choose your own adventures of Superman story where fans get to vote on what they think should happen next. It's as a fan fiction type of thing. So there's more to our website than just, giving you the latest news and information that's out there. We're trying to create a community and, there's comments and things that people can log in and post their own comments and things about. So very much trying to build that community feel back again, because we had that back in the day when there were message boards and social media wasn't part of our lives. So people would come to the site to post their comments and their thoughts. And I know those days are gone and now everyone's on social media and doing their thing elsewhere. But don't forget that the website is at the core of what we do.
Yeah, I encourage everyone to visit. I would venture to say, I'm sure everyone listening to this has been at some point, but if you haven't been in a while, this is a perfect opportunity. And then I swear I will let you go. This is my last question. So, when I started this podcast, one of the things we talked about in our very first episode was how, I worked at a comic book store for many years, and despite dealing with so many comics fans, it wasn't a frequent occurrence that someone shared that Superman was their favorite character. That was one of the things that's been so great about doing this, is connecting with fellow Superman fans. And it's like, I've found my people here. And so I guess I feel like my perspective has been skewed a little bit now because I've been so immersed over these past few years in this community, talking to Superman fans. And I know you are too. But to whatever extent you can answer this, I mean, what are you finding in terms of, I guess, new Superman fans, or because I know we've talked a lot about within the Superman fandom, or, speaking to people within the fandom, but as far as reaching non-Superman fans or just having non-Superman fans come to you, I guess anything that you might be able to share on that front, I'd be really curious about.
Yeah, it's kind of sad in a way that Superman isn't as prevalent or as in people's minds as maybe he once was. Maybe hopefully Superman Legacy will change that. Because there is so much to be able to consume now, even when there is a new TV series like Superman and Lois, people can not be on their radar whatsoever, and they go, "Oh, I didn't even know there was a new Superman show out," or that kind of thing. So, and I was just recently at a convention here in Sydney, and there were maybe 2 or 3 people wearing Superman costumes or Superman T-shirts, but for the most part, it's manga or it's anime or it's Batman or Spider-Man, and so it is a little bit sad to see that Superman has kind of fallen away a little bit as far as being the preeminent superhero when it comes to, the public. But superheroes in themselves, I think, are not as prevalent as they once were because, we've got all the Marvel movies and everything like that, but there are so many other characters and things, One Piece and, the Invincibles and all these other shows that are kind of tapping into that kind of area, but are different. And so I'd like to see Superman become as popular as he once was. I don't know if those days are gone by, but the fact that he still exists and that we're still talking about him, I think is proof positive that he'll be here long after you and I are both gone.
Well said. Well, Steve, thank you again so much for taking the time. It was great to meet you and to have you on the show. And again, I encourage everyone to check out supermanhomepage.com. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure to be on the show with you, and I appreciate you inviting me to do this with you, and being open to my discussion in the first place to have this discourse between us, because I think Superman fans who run different things like websites, podcasts, whatever, should reach out to each other more and share our experiences, not just as Superman fans, but as website runners, podcasters, whatever. So, keep up the great work. Love what you do. So well done. And hopefully we can, continue the friendship, as you said.
Absolutely. So thank you, Steve. Thank you, audience. As always, I always appreciate you tuning in. Make sure you come back in 1 week for our next all new episode. And until then, as always, it's about what you do. It's about action. This podcast is an affiliate of BCW Supplies. The next time you need to restock on comic book bags, boards, boxes, and more, be sure to use promo code FSP to save 10% on your order. That's FSP for Flat Squirrel Productions. It helps support the show too. Many of you have already used this code, and I greatly appreciate it. Thank you. Be sure to check out our sister podcast series, Another Exciting Episode in the Adventures of Superman, an episode-by-episode breakdown of the classic George Reeves television show, available wherever you get podcasts. Please join us on social media, become a patron, and subscribe, rate, and review today. Links are in the show notes. Thank you all.